Welcome to our Carers and Centrelink Community Worker Training webinar. I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of country. We at Welfare Rights Centre acknowledge the traditional owners on the land which we are today, the Gadigal of the Eora Nation, and pay respects to elders past and present. We respect that this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. We'll just do some housekeeping. You should have received a copy of the slides this morning if you registered for the session through our website. They are also available in the chat right now. Please write any questions you have regarding the content into the chat box. We'll be stopping several times to answer them, and we'll answer as many as we can. Please keep your questions broad, as we cannot give out any legal advice today, and questions regarding very specific situations will not be answered. When writing your questions, please be clear as to which payment or section your question is referring to. We will be adding links to relevant information into the chat throughout the session, and there will be a 5-minute break about halfway through to allow you to stretch your legs. So we're just going to introduce Welfare Rights Centre. Welfare Rights Centre is a community legal centre specializing in social security and family assistance law. We provide information, referrals, and legal representation to thousands of New South Wales residents each year who have a problem with Centrelink. So my name is Bree, and I'm the Welfare Rights Centre's Events and Communications Officer. And I'm joined this morning by our Principal Solicitor, Natalie Ross. Our peak organisations, our peak body is Economic Justice Australia, who we work with to advocate for law reform. So the aim of today's session is so that you can understand the basic structure of Centrelink payments for people who are carers, understanding the evidence required to show the severity of a person's disability and care needs, recognizing common problems experienced by people claiming payments as a carer. We want you to be able to understand how to appeal against a Centrelink decision, and we would like you to know how to refer to us for legal advice and ongoing support. So to reiterate, today's presentation is general information only. It is not legal advice. Clients should obtain legal advice about their individual circumstances. Please keep your questions broad. We can't answer very specific questions or give out legal advice today. So we are just going to do a quick poll. And we would like to know what kind of issues and difficulties you've encountered assisting people to get carers payment or carers allowance. So you can choose more than one answer. That should be on your screen now. Okay, so I'll just let this go for a minute or so. A few more seconds. Okay, so I'll just end the poll now. So it appears that people are encountering the issue of knowing what kind of care fits the eligibility criteria. Second most popular was understanding how the system works and knowing how much care fits the eligibility criteria. So I am just going to hand it over to Natalie now. Sorry, Natalie, we can't hear you. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry, Natalie, we can't hear you. You're muted. Apologies. Yep, it should be working now, Natalie.
Okay, fingers crossed. We're there. Excellent. Sorry about that, everybody. So, as Bree said, I'm Natalie Ross, one of the lawyers here at the Welfare Rights Centre, and I'm going to talk to you today about carer payment. About payments for carers, which includes carer payment and carer allowance. Can see that there are many people in our community who are getting payments as carers. So you can see there the carer payment, it's about 300,000 people, and for carer allowance, over 600,000 people. So that's a significant proportion of people getting Centrelink payments are carers. We know that a lot of people have problems with their applications to Centrelink. We know a lot of mistakes get made. We know people feel sometimes that they are banging their head against a brick wall when they're dealing with Centrelink. So we're hoping that the presentation today will help you help your clients get through the process of getting carer payments. So about 10% of Australians are carers, but only a small proportion of them are going to be eligible to get support from Centrelink. And there are a lot of reasons for that, based on how much care is provided, the type of care that's provided, the income and assets of people giving and receiving care. So some people who might be eligible to get a payment for a carer as a carer are already getting a different kind of Centrelink payment while they're caring, or possibly they've attempted to get a carer payment and have not been able to claim successfully. So this is the profile of people who get carer payment. About 80% of them are getting the full rate, which means their income and assets are not high enough to get a lower rate. And you'll see that people get carer payment for quite a long time. So people's caring commitments for their disabled or ill friends and relatives can go on for many, many years. And you'll also see that it's older age groups generally. And of course, it's women more than men who are in that caring role. So the age of people getting carer payment, majority are in working age, but there are some young people as well who get carer payment. For people who are being cared for, it really is the young and the old who are the main people needing care. All right, now before we go into the specifics of carer payment, we're going to talk about some of the common eligibility issues which are across pretty much all Centrelink payments. So for people who are applying for any kind of Centrelink payment, with some exceptions for special benefit, they need to either be an Australian citizen or have a permanent resident visa. And they also need to be in Australia when they make their application. As well as having a permanent resident visa, a person also needs to show that Australia is their home. So for some people who may spend some time in Australia and some time in another country or countries, Centrelink is going to have to make a decision about whether Australia is their primary home. And they'll look at things like how often the person is outside Australia, whether they own a property or have a lease on a property in Australia, whether they have a lot of family in Australia, whether their job or their business is in Australia, whether they hold assets in Australia. So they're the kinds of things that are looked at to work out is Australia this person's permanent home. Income and assets are a very important part of the picture for all Centrelink payments. So information has to be provided about income and assets, and that includes a partner's income and assets if the person applying for the payment is a member of a couple. And of course, you need to be able to prove who you are, need ID. So we might just stop there. I doubt there are any questions at this point, but just in case.
No questions yet, but if anybody does have any questions, please write them into the chat and we will answer them in the next question section.
Okay. So we're going to start with a case study. So I'm going to play it to you and hope you can all hear it.
Hi, Luke. I can see that you've applied for carer payment, but Centrelink rejected your claim. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, the school counsellor at my school said I should be able to get carer payment because my mum's really unwell and I have to help her a lot. So we put in a form, but Centrelink knocked it back.
All right. How old are you, Luke?
I'm 15 in year 10.
Okay. And can you tell me a bit about looking after your mum?
Well, she needs a lot of help because she can't get herself around that much. She can walk a bit sometimes, but usually she needs a wheelchair, so she can't really get herself around the house easily.
Is she able to do any of the cooking?
No, I do that. Basically, I do all the shopping, all the cooking. She might tell me to put some things on a shopping list and I go do all that.
And what about washing clothes?
No, she definitely can't do that. It's too heavy, especially lifting the washing or hanging it out. I mean, most mornings I have to help her get her clothes and things and take them to the bathroom before she has a shower.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when she's not good, I'll help put her into a chair we have in the shower, and she wears a singlet and pants, especially if she has to wash her hair, but sometimes even that's too much for her.
It sounds like she needs a lot of help. Can she get to the toilet by herself okay?
Sometimes, but sometimes she's so weak, I have to help get her off the toilet. It's not good.
That sounds like she's going through a lot, Luke. Is there anyone else able to help you?
Not really. I mean, we get two cleaners who come in 2 hours a week. They come through an agency for free, but they don't do that much, mainly just vacuuming and dusting. But it does help.
How does your mum manage when you're at school?
Well, the school know her. They know all about it. Sometimes they let me come home at lunch and I can give her lunch and maybe help her go to the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
I just tell my mates I'm going home for a cooked lunch. Oh, and sometimes if something happens and she needs help, she'll send me a text and I'll run over at recess because we live just across the road from the school.
It sounds like she needs quite a lot of help to get around. What happens if she needs to go to an appointment?
Well, usually I help her get ready, then I'll help her into a taxi and they'll help her at the other end.
All right. I think the best way to approach this
All right. So our case study about Luke is based on a real case that was heard at the tribunal. So I thought it would be a good basis to have a talk about what you need to show to be able to get carer payment. So you can see that Luke does a lot of caring for his mum, and his mum has very high care needs. Nonetheless, Luke was rejected for carer payment, and that decision was upheld at the tribunal. So let's have a bit of a look at about why that might have been the case. So to start with looking at the eligibility criteria for carer payment, there's no age limit. So the fact that Luke is a young person being a carer is not a problem of itself. So you need to be providing constant care to someone who is either a frail aged person or a person who could be a child or an adult who has a disability or a medical condition that means they need care. The care has to be provided in the home of the person who needs the care, and the care must be needed, permanently or for a minimum of 6 months, unless the person has a terminal illness with a prognosis of less than 6 months to live. Both the person giving the care and the person receiving the care must be Australian residents and in Australia. The person needing the care must have significant care needs, and we'll talk more about how care needs are assessed in a little while. And then there are income and assets tests, different income and assets tests that are applied to the person giving the care and the person receiving the care. So to start with, let's think about what is care. It's defined in our Social Security law as including attention and supervision. So it's quite a broad concept, but the important thing to note is that it relates to personal care, not things like housework or gardening or financial management. And the tribunal has decided in quite a few cases that these kind of household or domestic tasks are not of themselves care as required for carer payment or carer allowance. They're saying there are common things to the management of any household. And some tribunal decisions have also said that household tasks can generally be done at a time that's convenient. I'm not so sure about that, but the tribunal has found that the personal kind of care that a person might need is something that needs to be done on a constant basis. So to give you an example, my father is 93, so I spend a couple of days with him each week, and he has a few mobility problems and he's almost blind. So I read his emails and text messages to him, and I might make him a meal and do the washing and do some vacuuming and that kind of thing. But that would not be sufficient kind of care for me to get carer payment or carer allowance, because he is independent in his personal care. He can shower himself, he can go to the toilet himself, he can feed himself. And they're the kinds of things that are counted as care for carer payment and carer allowance. Now, it can also be, as in that definition, supervisory. So my mother has dementia. She's now in a nursing home, but when she was at home, she could go to the toilet and feed herself and have a shower, but she needed supervision all the time because she would do erratic things and needed to be watched all the time. So that is also the kind of care that can make you eligible for carer payment, that attention and supervision, and then that personal care, helping people who need help with getting dressed, going to the toilet, showering, feeding themselves. The next requirement for carer payment, which is an income support payment, is that the care provided must be constant care. And I've given you some information here from the Social Security Guide that talks about what is meant by constant care. So it's said to be care on a daily basis for a significant period during each day. And that can be the active, as in helping someone on and off the toilet, or that supervisory or monitoring kind of care. And as this is an income support payment, it's aimed at people who cannot work or can't work full time because of their caring responsibilities. So the idea is with constant care that you're putting in the equivalent of a working day in time in this personal caring role. So it doesn't mean that the carer has to be with the person they're caring for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it does mean this significant period each day, at least the equivalent of a normal working day's hours. Now, some people may want to combine some work or some study with their caring role, and this is possible, but it depends how many hours each week a person might be working or studying as to whether they could also get a carer payment. And you can see there I've got an extract from a tribunal decision from a few years ago, which says, generally, as a rule of thumb, if a person is working 25 hours or more a week, that person is unlikely to be able to be providing constant care that significant period each day, the equivalent of working a full-time day. And so if the carer stops their caring for more than 25 hours a week to study or work or do voluntary work, then their carer payment should be reviewed because they may no longer be eligible. Most of the cases at the tribunal about carer payment are actually about carer payment debts, where a person's situation has changed, as in they may have started a course or started a job, and if they haven't told Centrelink, and Centrelink finds out later on and decides that because of the hours they're spending working or studying, they shouldn't have been getting the carer payment, they will cancel it retrospectively and raise debts, often very large debts. So it's always important to keep Centrelink notified of changes. So the next step I want to talk about is to talk about how the person's care needs are assessed to work out if their care needs are great enough for someone to be able to get carer payment to look after them. So Centrelink uses two things they call tools. For adults needing care, they use this thing called the Adult Disability Assessment Tool, and for children needing care, Disability Care Load Assessment, which allocates scores according to questionnaires that are answered both by the carer and a health professional involved in the care of that person. Or alternatively, you can provide evidence showing that a person has a terminal illness with a less than 3-month life expectancy. So these assessment tools, they measure how much care is needed with these basic activities we were talking about before, such as eating, bathing, and also in there is behaviour management. So it does take into account the person's physical, cognitive, and behavioural disabilities. Oh, I think I've gone in the wrong direction there. Sorry, let's go forward instead of back. So we've put an example of the Adult Disability Assessment Tool here on the screen, so you can have a look at what kinds of questions are asked. And with the scoring value is actually different for each question in the questionnaire. So for question 1 there, which is about how a person can move around the house, a person will get a score of 0 if they answer A, will get a score of 3 if they answer B, a score of 6 if they answer C, and a score of 9 if they answer D. But then the scoring system is completely different from the second question about falls, where they'll get a score of 2 if they answer A, 1 if they answer B, and none if they answer C. So you can see there it's asking about mobility, falls, what movements or what they call transfers from bed, chair, wheelchair, etc. And here about difficulties with hearing and seeing, whether they need help during the night, whether they're continent, whether they use continence aids, whether they can use a toilet without help or not, whether they wander or run away, do they disturb other people by shouting or screaming, threatening, or harming other people. So that's the questions the carers asked. And then in the second part of the questionnaire, this is where the health professional has to answer questions as well. And you can see there's some guidance given here to the health professional about how they should answer these questions. And then you'll see they're asked about continence, grooming, toilet use, feeding, transfers from bed to chair, etc., general mobility, being able to dress, climb stairs, bathe, cognitive functions, memory, and behaviour. So they're the kinds of documents that need to be completed before a person can get carer payment. Now, with that assessment tool, a person will end up with a score, and that score can affect whether a person can get carer payment or not. So you can get carer payment to care for an adult who has a high score, but if, as a carer, you're already looking after a child, you can get carer payment to look after an adult with a lower care score. You can get carer payment for a child who has a severe disability or medical condition. Or if you have 2 or more children with less severe disability or medical condition, you can also get carer payment. And if you have a child with a disability and you're caring for an adult with a lower score, you can get carer payment. So the scoring becomes quite important, and other caring responsibilities are important to work out eligibility for carer payment. Some people have extremely high care needs, and it's possible that 2 people can get carer payment to care for the same person if they have extremely high care needs. Now, we mentioned before that income and assets are always taken into account. So for the person providing the care, the person who's applying for carer payment, they are subject to the same income and assets test as other pensions, like the age pension, the disability support pension. For the person receiving the care, some people receiving care have income and assets tests applied to them as well. And so if people have a low score on the assessment, or they're not receiving a Centrelink or veterans payment themselves, a separate income and assets test will be applied to the person receiving the care as well. So you may be caring for someone, but if they're quite rich, you may not be able to get carer payment to look after them. All right, any questions at this point, Rick?
Hi, Natalie. We do have a few questions. Okay, so the first question is from are there any payments that don't require an income and assets test?
I don't think so. Our whole social security system, I suppose, is a needs-based system. So I don't think there are any payments that don't have some. We'll go on to talk about carer allowance, actually, which has doesn't have an asset test, but does have an income test. So the income and assets tests are different for different payments, but they're always there.
Okay. What happens if a client has an asset in their name, but they can't use it as they are separated from their partner?
There are provisions in the Social Security law. They're called asset hardship provisions, and you can apply to have an asset in your name not counted in the assessment of your assets if you can show that you can't access that asset, you can't sell it, you can't borrow against it, It might be subject to a pending property settlement between a separated couple, or there's some other court case involving the asset. So it may be that in some situations an asset may not be counted.
If a carer receives an NDIS service, does it affect their payment?
No, my understanding is that payments from the NDIS are not counted in the income test.
Okay, when we talk about permanent residence eligibility for the carer's support, does that include New Zealand citizens?
No. So New Zealand citizens have a right to come and live in Australia and work in Australia for as long as they want, but they have very restricted access to any social security payments. So unless they get a permanent resident visa or become an Australian citizen, and the path for New Zealand citizens to become Australian citizens has been made much easier in the last few years. It was an action taken by the current government. But unless they've taken steps to become an Australian citizen or permanent residents, they generally don't have access to most social security payments. There is a social security agreement between Australia and New Zealand, which may give some New Zealanders access to payments, but that's getting into the realm of we need to look at that person's particular situation. So send them to us if that's a problem.
If someone has less than 6 months to live, can a carer be eligible for the carer payment?
I think the criteria is less than 3 months to live to just automatically get the carer payment. Otherwise, it would go through that assessment process.
Will there be alignment between definitions of care and carer between different agencies? Example, Carer Gateway, My Aged Care, NDIS, etc.
What I've been talking about here are definitions in the Social Security law that apply to payments made under Social Security law. I can't comment on whether other systems that connect to carers have the same or different kind of definitions. They may not be.
Gail would like to know, how does online study affect carers' payment?
Well, online study, you'd have to give Centrelink information about how many hours a week online study you were doing, and it would depend if it was over or under the 25 hours a week. I suppose if the kind of care was monitoring rather than active, you might be able to make an argument that because it's online and you're present, you can monitor and do online study as well. I don't know how that argument would go, but it would be possible to make it. You have to show you're still providing constant care while doing online study.
Who would be the most appropriate professional to complete the assessment tools?
I think it would depend on the type of disability or condition that the person had. And I think commonly GPs will fill it out, but there may be some situations where another health professional might be more appropriate. I think most commonly GPs do it. I don't think it's the kind of questionnaire that where it's considered you need a medical specialist to fill it out.
Okay. So Zoe would like to know if with a lot of help means hoisting or means that they can't move at all.
Or is this relating to a question in the questionnaire?
Yes, I believe it. Yeah, with the scoring, I think it was relating to.
I think I would have to go back and look at that.
Okay.
I think a lot of help, it might mean you need a couple of people or you need a piece of equipment. I think it would depend on the situation. May need, I don't know that. Without looking into that further, I can be more specific.
Is the scoring about the amount of support the carer is providing or about the support the cared for person needs? How does access to NDIS support factor into these assessments about how much support the carer is providing?
It's about how much support the carer needs in terms of the assessment tool. The separate question about whether the person providing care is providing constant care could be affected by support provided through the NDIS. So it may mean that because of whatever support might be coming funded through the NDIS, the carer is providing less care. It could affect whether they meet that threshold of providing constant care or not. But that would be on a case-by-case basis to work that out.
Can a person who is on job seeker payment have a carer if they have health conditions that do not allow them to function on their
own? The question of whether, anyone can have a carer, and the assessment for carer payment is based on the person's care needs. It's not connected to what social security payment they may be getting.
When it's said that the care has to be provided in the care recipient's home, would that mean if the care recipient moved in with the carer would then be ineligible?
No, because if the care recipient moved in, they've got a new home.
Yeah.
And the care's being provided there. So no, I don't think so.
Okay, just do one more and then we'll move on. What happens if the professional assessment differs from the carer assessment? Does the professional assessment carry more weight?
I don't think I know the answer to that. I'd have to check that, which I could try and do in the break.
Yeah, guess we'll move on for now and we'll answer more questions in a bit.
Okay. And I just realised I didn't go back to our case study we had at the start of the carer payment section. And although Luke's mother had high care needs and Luke was providing a lot of care to her, because he was attending school and was attending school for more than 25 hours a week, he was found not to be providing constant care and therefore not eligible for carer payment. So I should have said that at the end to round off our section on carer payment. Oh, we're already at our break time.
Okay,
So,
should we take the break now, or there are a couple more questions if you'd like to go through those?
yeah, well, we can have a couple more questions and then have a break. Let's do that.
Okay, so I guess we're ahead of time today. Okay, what happens when the caregiver has reduced functioning capacity themselves due to chronic ill health? Does that mean they are no longer eligible? How does Centrelink assess this?
Well, I think it depends whether they are providing constant care. If their own health condition stops them from providing constant care, then they would no longer be eligible for carer payment. So it depends very much on whether whatever their own medical condition or disability is, whether that stops them from providing the care and stops them from providing that constant care for a significant part of every day. And if they were not eligible for carer payment, they could investigate whether they themselves were eligible for disability support, pension or some other payment.
Can a wife claim for care allowance for her husband? And then can their daughter claim a care allowance for their mother, who is the wife?
Well, the answer is, can you claim? Sorry, the question is, can you claim? And you can always claim. I suppose the question is really, would those claims be successful? And it's really about whether the criteria is met or not. So after the break, we'll talk about carer allowance and what the criteria are. So if the daughter can show that she meets the criteria, the carer allowance for her father, and if the mother can show she meets the criteria, the carer payment or carer allowance, I can't recall, for the daughter, then that can all happen. It's all about whether the eligibility criteria are met or not.
Is the assessment criteria different for children, given that all young children could be requiring personal care assistance?
Yes, that assessment tool we looked at was to do with for adults, and it is a different tool used for children, a different questionnaire, because of course, all babies are in effect incontinent. All children under a certain age require constant supervision. So those need help to be fed and so on. So yes, the questionnaire relating to children is very different, and it's looking at care needs above and beyond the care expected for a child of that age. Oh, you're on mute, Bree. Sorry.
Yes, I am. Sorry. Can you get care payment to care for two adults with differing care needs?
Yes. If we go back to, I'll find the slide. No, I missed it. Here we go. Sorry, it wasn't back nearly as far as I thought. So I think you can, but it would depend on whether you could show that you were, meeting the criteria of constant care. For those adults. But maybe I should check that because it's not on my list here. So is that two high needs adults is the question?
Yes, they're wondering if you can essentially get two care payments, I'm guessing,
Oh, I think
two
that's
different
it.
adults with differing care needs.
No, you can't get two carer payments, if that's the question.
Okay. I believe that's all the questions for the moment, although there is some discussion in the chat regarding the 25-hour rule on employment, education, and volunteering and how that's changing. Do you know anything about that legislation that might be being introduced next year?
No, but happy to hear more about it if someone wants.
Okay. Okay.
Is that in relation to carer payment or to some other?
To do with they were talking about studying how that affects the payments. Yeah.
Okay, something else for me to say.
Oh, and there is one question.
Okay.
Sorry, we're still a little bit ahead of time. So there's a question about the case study. How does the 25-hour rule apply to young people who are legally required to attend school full time? If they don't attend, isn't that educational neglect?
I'm not quite sure how that connects to carer payment. So young people are required to attend school.
Yeah.
And in the case study, he was attending school.
Mm.
So
there's another question. Can your care time be split for carer needs for 2 people in the household?
that goes back to the slide we were looking at before. So it is recognised that you may be caring for more than one person if you're getting carer payment. Not sure if that's what that question is getting at.
Yes, I believe they're asking if the care time can be split if you have 2 people in the household who have different needs.
I suppose the answer is yes, but I'm not sure I quite understand the question. But obviously, if you're caring for 2 people, you'll be spending some time with one and some time with the other.
So the Holly has given more information about her question regarding the
Okay.
case study. She said he was rejected for carer payment due to the fact he was attending school for more than 25 hours, even though he was providing personal care. Yeah. So I'm just trying to work out what the question is. I guess, yeah, he, sorry, he was rejected for the payment because he was attending school for more than 25 hours, but he was providing personal care. So
He was providing personal care, but he wasn't providing constant care because he was absent for so much of the week. So therefore, he wasn't considered eligible for carer payment. So you need to be both providing the personal care and providing it for a significant part equivalent to at least a working day. That's the difference.
If you are caring for multiple children with a disability/medical condition, how does Centrelink work out the amount of payment?
The amount of payment doesn't change. So carer payment is a fixed amount. However many people you're caring for, the amount you're getting does not change with carer payment.
Okay.
We'll move on to carer allowance after the break, but for carer payment,
I
that
believe
amount won't change.
that's all the questions for now. So I guess we'll take the break 10 minutes early, if that's okay with everybody.
Sounds good. So we might get started again. We've just got a couple of things to follow up from our session before the break. Just following up on the question about whether the health professional questionnaire is given more weight than the carer part of the questionnaire in the assessment tool. And I suppose in some ways, yes, the health professionals is given more weight in that the person needs to get a minimum qualifying score in the health professional section, as well as a minimum qualifying total when you added up the health professional and the carer section. So there's a minimum score in the health professional section that doesn't apply to the overall, that doesn't apply to the carer section of the questionnaire. And we also checked on the changes coming up potentially next year. So the for the working and studying more than 25 hours a week issue. So my colleague Thea found the press release from the Minister for Social Services from earlier this year, which say the government's proposing to change the requirements for carer payment recipients. So rather than the level being at 25 hours a week, it will change to 100 hours over 4 weeks. So you might say 100 hours over 4 weeks is 25 hours a week, but it means that you could do 50 1 week and or 48 one week and 0 the next, and maintain your eligibility is what it sounds like. So they're saying if the government gets that changed through the parliament, it would come into effect next year. So we're going to move on now to talk about carer allowance. So in the first part of our session, we talked about carer payment, which is an income support payment, the equivalent of age pension, disability support pension, where it's recognised someone can't work or can't work full-time because of their caring responsibilities. Carer allowance is a supplementary payment. It's an extra payment to recognise the burden and extra cost of caring for someone. And a person who gets carer payment can also get carer allowance. But people on other payments can get carer allowance, and people who work can get carer allowance. So it's a different species of payment. Now, as before, we're going to start with our case study, just to get us thinking about carer allowance.
Hi, George. My name's Daniel from the Welfare Rights Centre. How are you going today?
Not too bad, Daniel.
That's good.
Getting on.
Okay, so I understand you're wanting to claim carer allowance because you're caring for your wife. Is that right?
Yes, Carer New South Wales suggested I ring Welfare Rights and see
Okay.
where I stand in this situation with my wife.
All right. So can you just tell me a little bit about your wife and any conditions she's experiencing at the moment?
Yes, Tina, about 2 years ago, started to get a bit of dementia. Now it's got worse, and I'm finding now I've got to do everything for her, including the cooking, washing, everything. Where she used to pay the bills before, I've even got to take over the bill payment because I just realised a few weeks ago that there's a few bills that haven't been paid that are outstanding, especially the house insurance. A little bit worried, so I've taken everything now.
Got you. Okay, so it sounds like her conditions deteriorated. Could you just describe to me a day in the life of you caring for your partner at the moment?
Well, getting out of bed in the morning, making sure she's okay, now helping her to get dressed and prepare herself for the day. I find, it's a bit worrying, the work I've got to do. I've virtually don't stop from start to finish. She relies on me to do everything now. And if I'm not in the house and I've had to go outside and hang the washing out, she worries. No one's there.
Yeah.
Next week, I've got a dentist's appointment, which I'm worried about because I'll have to find someone to come in and take my place while I'm at the dentist. I can't even go out and get a haircut.
Okay, that sounds very difficult.
Yeah.
You've got a lot on your plate at the moment. All right, we'll go through some very specific questions about her care needs in a moment. I just wanted to quickly cover off on your asset situation. Like, are you living, do you own your own home and living together with your wife?
Living together, we're on the pension. Both of us are on the pension. We're living in a unit, which we've owned for a few years. A few years back, we decided to buy a unit in the same block that we're in. The rent is paying for the mortgage there, so that's okay. And we own our own unit.
Okay, got you. All right, so we'll just go to some of those specific questions about her care needs now.
Okay, so you can see from that study that George is already getting an income support payment. He gets the age pension. as does his wife, and he's finding he's assumed greater caring responsibilities for his wife as her dementia has got worse and worse. And he's wanting to know whether he might be eligible for carer allowance. So let's have a look at carer allowance and the eligibility. So to get carer allowance, and you'll remember from our slide at the start that more people get carer allowance than get carer payment. So it's easier to get carer allowance. The eligibility criteria are a bit less strict. So to get carer allowance, you have to show that you provide care and attention on a daily basis. So that's a lower criteria than constant care that's needed for carer payment. The care can be provided in the private home of the person giving the care or the home of the person receiving the care. So again, it's different from carer payment, which has to be where the care has to be provided in the home of the care receiver. The care needs to be needed either permanently or for a minimum of 12 months. That's another difference with carer payment, where the care has to be needed permanently or for a minimum of 6 months. Once again, the caregiver and care receiver have to be Australian residents. Remember, the permanent resident visa or the citizen. Something I didn't mention before when we were talking about residents is that there are waiting periods for new migrants to Australia, so that if you come to Australia as a new migrant, once you get your permanent residence visa, you need to wait 2 years before you can get carer payment and 1 year before you can get carer allowance. The person providing the care is more restricted with carer allowance. So the care must be provided by the parent or guardian of a child and by a family member or approved person of an adult. So it's a bit more restricted as in who's providing the care. The same assessment tools are used, and if an assessment has already been done for carer payment, that same assessment can be used for carer allowance. There's no asset test. There is an income test, but it's a very generous income test. So the income for the household, for the carer and their partner, if they've got a partner, less than 250,000. So thinking about our case study, George, he does have some assets because he's got that investment property. We're not sure what it's worth, but that's disregarded for the purpose of carer allowance. So George is definitely providing care and attention on a daily basis for his wife. It's provided in their own home. Dementia is an ongoing degenerative condition, so the care will be needed permanently. So it looks to me like George will be able to get carer allowance because he's not likely to be getting more than 250,000 income from his investment property. So in terms of what the Social Security Guide says is care and attention, which is what's needed to get carer allowance, we're talking about some additional care and attention on a daily basis because of their disability or medical condition, or again because they're frail aged, that would not be required if they did not have a disability. Now, remember that with carer allowance, the care doesn't have to be provided in the care receiver's home, but where the carer and the adult care receiver don't live in the same premises, the care and attention must be provided on a daily basis and for at least 20 hours a week. But that criteria about hours per week doesn't apply if the carer and the care receiver are living together. So here's just summarising some of the differences between carer payment and carer allowance that I was mentioning before. So we've got constant care for carer payment and daily care and attention for carer allowance. Care only in the care receiver's home for carer payment, but in the care receiver or the caregiver's home for carer allowance. With carer payment, the income and assets tests are applied, but with carer allowance, there's no assets test and a more generous income test. And I said earlier that potentially someone who's working is eligible to get carer allowance. Carer payment can be paid to more than one carer for the same person. And with carer allowance, you can get more than one carer allowance if you're caring for more than one person. There was a question earlier about whether you can get more than one carer payment if you're caring for more than one person, and the answer was no. But with carer allowance, the answer is yes, you can get paid more than one carer allowance if you're caring for more than one person. So do we have any questions about carer allowance?
Yes, we have a few questions here. Just 1 second. I'm not sure if they're specifically about care allowance, but we have some
All right, we'll find out.
Okay. Okay. This is going back to the first case study, actually.
Okay.
Would the young carer Luke in the first case study qualify for carer allowance despite attending school?
I would say yes, he may well qualify for carer allowance.
Would both parents of a child with disability be able to claim carer allowance?
I don't think so. But I haven't considered that, but I don't think so.
Who is an approved person and who approves the person as a carer?
It would have to be Centrelink Services Australia approving the person as a carer.
As carer allowance is a supplementary payment, does the recipient need to already be receiving some sort of Centrelink income support payment? Or if they're not, can they still access carer allowance?
Yes, they don't have to be getting an income support payment to be getting carer allowance. They just have to meet the income test, have themselves and their partner's income under that $250,000 a year.
If a care recipient is in hospital for several months of the year, can a carer be eligible for carer allowance?
We'll get onto that quite soon.
Okay. Sorry, gotten a little bit behind with questions. Okay. This Pauline would like to confirm: is a doctor's letter of support required for carer's allowance?
The assessment tool is required, so it's not a letter of support, but the doctor needs to fill out the treating health professionals section of the assessment tool.
With the income test, if you're on carer's allowance, but your joint income goes over 250,000, does this mean you lose the carer's allowance?
Yes.
What degree of daily care is required for carer's allowance?
Well, if we go back to our slide here. So additional care and attention on a daily basis connected to the care receiver's disability or severe medical condition. There's no kind of number of hours put on it if the caregiver and care receiver live in the same place. In situations where the caregiver and care receiver live in separate places, then the requirement is for at least 20 hours a week.
Sorry. If parents are separated, can one parent dispute that they should get the carer allowance? Can it be transferred onto another parent?
So I'll have to come back to that one.
Can a person living in a family home receive carers payment for one family that needs constant care and a carers allowance for another not so high needs family member?
Can you say that one again, please?
So if a person is living in their family home, and can they receive a carers payment for one family member that needs constant care and carers allowance for another family member who is not so high needs?
Well, they might be able to get carer payment and 2 carer allowances because they're likely to be eligible for a carer allowance for both those people. I think might be the answer.
Okay. How often is carers allowance reviewed by Centrelink?
I don't know. They do random reviews. I don't know if there's any kind of regular review that they do. But they send out letters regularly, and you have an obligation to update Centrelink about any change of circumstances within 14 days in terms of changes to the care needs, changes to your work or study, changes of address, person going into hospital or a nursing home. So the obligation is very much on the person receiving the payment to update Centrelink.
Is daily care physical, or can it include mental illnesses? Or
yes, it can. I think include that kind of monitoring and supervision, which is which I think is what the question I might be meaning.
is there a limit on the number of carers allowances you can claim if you're caring for several people?
Well, I think there probably would be in practical terms to demonstrate that you're providing care attention, particularly if you weren't living with them and it's a minimum of 20 hours. That would restrict it, I think, to a couple of people. I suppose if you had, a number of children with disabilities, you may be able to get the number of care allowances that you had numbers of children with disabilities. So I just think in practical terms it wouldn't be that many.
If a carer and a care recipient are already receiving Centrelink payments, would they need to fill in the income and assets forms again?
I don't know. I mean, the application form probably does have questions about income and assets. So probably yes. But I'm not sure. It may say, yeah, I don't know what the form says. I'm not sure.
Okay. What is the allowance intended to be used for in expenditure? Are there any rules about that?
No.
Okay. If somebody works full-time but cares for somebody that is experiencing mental illness, are they eligible for carers allowance?
Well, it depends if they meet the criteria. If we go back to our eligibility criteria, are they providing care and attention on a daily basis in the home of their home or the person who's receiving the care? Is that care needed ongoing or for a minimum of 12 months? So it's whether does the person's care needs meet the minimum score. So it's impossible to answer really, hypothetically. It just depends on whether they meet those eligibility criteria.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was going to say, I think we'll move on for now, and I will go through the chat and any questions that we may not have answered. That I'll keep those for the next section. So.
Okay, thanks, Bree. All right, we're going to look now at a few other issues that come up for people getting carer payment or wanting to get carer payment or carer allowance. So because this topic is about caring, we're necessarily looking at situations where the care receiver, person being cared for, may at times be in hospital. We may be looking at situations where the person giving the care needs a break from caring. So those situations are called temporary cessation of care in the legislation and the Social Security Guide. So let's have a look at what happens in those situations. So people getting both carer payment and carer allowance are allowed to have breaks from caring and still get their payments. It's what people commonly call respite from caring. So in any calendar year, a carer can have up to 63 days where they're not actively caring and still get paid the carer payment and or the carer allowance. And it doesn't matter what they do in those 63 days. There are some situations where the 63 days might be extended for special reasons. And importantly, in addition to that temporary cessation of care, the respite, people can be paid carer payment and carer allowance for up to 63 days while the care receiver is in hospital, as long as the carer is visiting all the time and making some contribution to the care of the person while they're in the hospital. They can maintain their eligibility to carer payment and carer allowance during that time the person they're caring for is in hospital, up to 63 days. Now, if the hospitalisation of the person goes beyond the 63 days, in most situations, the carer payment and carer allowance will be stopped. If the person receiving care, instead of just going to hospital for some kind of temporary period for treatment, if that person moves into some kind of, for example, an aged care facility or a group home for people with disabilities, that's going to be their new permanent home, if the carer has been getting carer payment, that carer payment will continue for 14 weeks after the person has moved to the aged care facility or whatever other place they're moving to. And it really is allowing a transition for the carer, a bit over 3 months, while they make other arrangements, look for a job, apply for a different Centrelink payment, gives them that transition period if their caring role is going to stop because the person needs even higher care than they can provide and they're moving on somewhere else. The carer allowance will stop immediately in that situation. Very important to tell Centrelink if your caring stops for any reason, because if you don't, there's a very high risk of getting a significant debt. Now, another issue that can come up is what happens with leaving Australia for travel, whether that's the carer travelling or the person being cared for travelling. So what the rules are, if a person's getting carer payment, they can be paid if they're travelling overseas with the person they're caring for up to 6 weeks. So if you and the person you're caring for are travelling overseas and you're going to be away for more than 6 weeks, the carer payment will stop at the 6-week mark. If the carer is travelling overseas but without the person they're caring for, they can also continue to be paid carer payment for up to 6 weeks if they've got enough of their 63 respite days still available for that calendar year. So they've got 63 respite days a year. As long as there's 42 of them left, the person can keep being paid their carer payment overseas. So it's just really another version of those 63 calendar days a year respite days. If a person is the person being cared for and they travel overseas without their carer, the carer will continue getting carer payment again if they have enough of those 63 respite days in the calendar year, if there are enough of those left to cover the period that the care receiver is outside of Australia. If they don't have enough respite days left, then the carer payment will stop while the person they're caring for is outside of Australia. With carer allowance, it can be paid while the caregiver's out of Australia for up to 6 weeks. But because people getting carer allowance are often on some other payment, it might be carer payment, but it might be age pension, for example, or it could be some other Centrelink payment. The person needs to be mindful of the rules for their main payment about travelling overseas and being paid while outside of Australia. So, for example, for people getting disability support pension, they can only be paid outside of Australia for 4 weeks. So the rules for overseas travel are different for different Centrelink payments. So a good place to start is the Centrelink website to get those rules about overseas travel. Just want to talk about some other payments that carers get. So people who get carer payment or carer allowance get a carer supplement each year. And people who receive carer allowance for a child with a disability also get a child disability assistance payment every year. Any more questions at this point, Bree?
Hi, Natalie. There's a couple. If a carer is looking after a child and they are staying with the child in hospital, is this counted as respite days?
No, it's counted as continuing eligibility for carer payment. So I might just go back to that slide. So that period of 63 days while someone's in hospital, that's separate to the rest 63 respite days. And as long as, and often when a child in hospital, the parent is pretty much living at the hospital while the child's in hospital, and that will maintain their eligibility for carer payment while the child's in hospital and separate to their respite days.
I believe you answered this question a couple of minutes ago as far as overseas travel, but can para payments be taken overseas?
I think we did cover that. And
yes.
The answer is yes for a period of time, but not indefinitely. And it depends on whether you're travelling with the person you're caring for or not. So if you're not travelling with the person you're caring for, you have to look at your respite days. and knowing that the maximum is 6 weeks, even if you have enough respite days.
And does that mean that the caregiver needs to inform Centrelink if they go overseas?
Absolutely, yes. Okay, that's one of the many things you need to tell Centrelink about. Yes, if you're leaving Australia, to let them know.
If you are caring for multiple children with a disability, how does Centrelink work out the amount of payment? I think we have covered this, but
yeah, it's a set amount of care allowance. And if you're entitled to more than one care allowance, it would just be multiplying it by 2 or 3 or whatever it is. I don't have the figure in my mind, I'm sorry.
Okay, that is all the questions for the moment. If I have accidentally skipped anyone's question, and yeah, please feel free to just remind me in the chat because we have had a lot of questions coming in.
Right, so we're going to move on to our next section, which is about appeals. So this is all about what you can do if Centrelink makes a decision that you disagree with. So it could be that you've applied for carer payment or carer allowance and have been rejected, or you're getting carer payment and or carer allowance and they've been suspended or cancelled. It could be that you have been sent a letter saying you've got to pay money back to Centrelink. You disagree with that. So pretty much any decision that Centrelink makes about a payment, whether it should be granted, whether it should continue, can be appealed. The only rider we give is that we recommend getting legal advice before appealing in relation to a debt, because there's certainly a theoretical possibility that a debt can increase as well as decrease when you go through the appeal process, and you might want to find out a bit more about that before embarking on the appeal process. So one thing I might mention to start with, some of you may have heard that just last month we have a new tribunal dealing with reviews of Centrelink decisions and all kinds of other decisions made by federal government agencies. So the old tribunal, which has now been abolished, was called the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, and it's now been replaced since mid-October by the Administrative Review Tribunal. But the impact on people going through this appeal processes shouldn't be very much. The process is pretty much the same as it once was. So if you're not happy with a decision made by Centrelink, there are kind of levels of appeal, and you have to start at the bottom and work your way through. You can't leap ahead. So the first stage or level of appeal, if you're not happy with a Centrelink decision, is to ask for an internal review within Centrelink of that decision. And someone within Centrelink called an authorised review officer, who hasn't had previous involvement in that decision, will look at the decision made by Centrelink, and they should talk to you if you're the person who's asked for that review and get your views on the matter. And then they'll make a decision about whether they think that original decision was correct or not. And you get sent a letter which sets out why the authorised review officer thinks that the decision was correct or not. There are some time limits, and the time limits relate to whether you can get back pay if your appeal is ultimately successful. So if you're asking for a review of a decision to reject your claim for a payment or to cancel your payment, it's important to ask for this review by the authorised review officer within 13 weeks so that if the review is ultimately successful, you can get back pay for the payments you missed out on. But also important to note that for debts, there's no particular time limit to ask for a debt to be reviewed. So if you have your review by the authorised review officer at Centrelink and you're not happy with the outcome, your next step is to go to this new administrative review tribunal. And once again, you've got 13 weeks from when you get your authorised review officer decision letter to lodge your appeal at the tribunal to ensure you get back pay if your review is successful. So the Administrative Review Tribunal is completely independent from Centrelink. It's an independent body and it has members, and a member will be allocated to do your review. In most cases, Centrelink won't participate in the review. There'll be a hearing, nowadays most commonly just by telephone or Teams, but you can request to go and do a hearing in person if you think that's important. And the tribunal member will get a copy of the file from Centrelink with all the relevant documents. They'll talk to you at the hearing. It's quite informal, and then we'll make a decision. If you're not happy with that decision, you can have a second review by a different tribunal member that has a shorter time limit of 28 days. And if you're not happy with the second review decision, it is possible to go to the Federal Court of Australia. We absolutely recommend you get legal advice before doing that, both because it's much more complex, while the procedures in tribunal are very informal. There's no fees involved apart from paid parental leave, second review. With the Federal Court, there are fees involved, and more importantly, if you lose the case, you could be ordered to pay the Commonwealth Government's legal costs, which would be considerable. So it's definitely not something to be undertaken lightly. Questions about appeals or anything else there, Bree?
How many weeks of back pay does Centrelink usually offer?
It's not a matter, I suppose, of what they offer. It's to do with the dates when certain things happened. So if Centrelink cancelled my carer payment on the 1st of May this year, as long as I ask for the authorised review officer review of that cancellation within 13 weeks of the 1st of May, if the review is in my favour, I'll get back paid back to the date it was cancelled. If the authorised review officer upheld the cancellation and I decided to go to the tribunal, as long as I went to the tribunal within 13 weeks of getting my letter from the authorised review officer saying the decision was upheld, as long as I lodge my tribunal claim within 13 weeks, if the tribunal finds in my favour, which by then, it could be November or December, I'll get back paid back to the 1st of May when my payment was cancelled, if the tribunal finds that it should never have been cancelled. So it's not so much a matter of what's offered, but the dates that certain things happened and whether you challenge that within the time limit.
So Sue has a question regarding the Centrelink, the carer's payment care allowance medical report. She says she's never been able to find the points awarded for different responses under different responses to items. Is this publicly available somewhere, and is there a maximum overall score for eligibility?
It's probably more like a minimum score for eligibility.
Yeah.
And yes, those points are publicly available. I have to find them, but we could send them out to people.
Okay.
Sue, once we find them.
If you'd like to put your email address, send me your email address in a direct message. I'll get that to you. Is it standard practice when an authorized review officer relies on third-party verbal accounts but doesn't use actual hard evidence / documents submitted to them?
Well, I suppose the authorized review officers are looking at the range of evidence available, some of which will be documents, some of which will be based on conversations with people. And then I suppose, they may give more or less weight to different things they've been told. And it would be unusual, I would think, to go for a verbal account that contradicted a document, but without knowing more details, it's a bit hard to comment. But if you're not happy with the authorised review officer decision, you do have the opportunity of going to this informal tribunal.
When is a good time to get Welfare Rights Centre involved?
Okay, that's an excellent question. We don't help people apply for payments. We don't help people fill in forms for payments. The best time for us to get involved is certainly after a decision's been made that you're not happy with. So either your claim for payment's been rejected, or your payment's been cancelled, or a debt's been raised against you. And often we may not offer an appointment until after you've requested an authorised review officer review and got that decision letter, because in our experience, often the reasons given at the point a claim is rejected or a payment's cancelled, often there's not much there, and often we can't work out why what's happened has happened. Whereas once we have the authorised review officer decision letter, then we at least have a good idea of what's happened and why. And then we can talk to you and say, well, did this happen? Did you agree with this? And then we will be in a better position to advise you about whether you've got a good chance if you went to the tribunal of challenging that decision and that kind of thing. So certainly post-adverse decision is where we get involved.
Do we accept interstate referrals?
Generally not. So we do have kind of sister organisations in other states and territories. So if people from outside of New South Wales contacted us, we will refer them to community legal centres in other states and territories who do social security law advice. The only exception to that is we get some support from the superannuation fund called HESTA, and so we do give it information and advice to HESTA members anywhere in Australia. But yeah, other than that, we confine to helping people in New South Wales.
And I have just put a list of social security / welfare rights help in other states into the chat. Okay. If you have already paid off a Centrelink debt, can you still appeal the decision?
Yes.
Okay.
But it's a bit harder to succeed.
I believe that is all the questions that we have. Just to actually, there's one more question, but I can answer it.
Okay.
As far as the recording of this webinar, I will be putting this up on our YouTube channel later in the week, and I will notify everybody via email. So yes, you will get a recording. So that's all the questions in the chat.
Okay.
Okay, so I will take over from here. Well, if you're in New South Wales and you have a problem with Centrelink, our client intake line is open. Sorry, Natalie, the slides have actually moved.
Oh, okay.
So it's a little bit further along.
Okay. This one.
Yes. Our client intake line is open every Monday and Wednesday from 9:30 till 12:30, or you can contact us online through our website or via email. And then, sorry, 2 back, please. This is my fault, apologies. Okay, so registrations are now open on our website for our upcoming Migrants and Centrelink webinar, which is running in December. It's our last webinar for 2024. And you will receive an email as well with a link to register for that quite soon. So supporting your client with Centrelink, if your client has difficulty accessing Centrelink for whatever reason, language, IT barriers, etc., Services Australia have printed audio and video resources in a wide variety of languages, and we will put the link for this into the chat. The client can either fill in the online form or print it and return, and we'll put the link to the form in the chat as well for you. Sorry, next slide. Sorry. Yep, so we've gone through that. So if you would like to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and also, as I mentioned, our YouTube channel now, for regular Welfare Rights Centre updates, along with Centrelink tips and educational information. That would be brilliant. And we would like to thank Extra for funding our training program. Sorry, Natalie. We would really appreciate it if you could take 5 minutes to complete our evaluation survey. The link is on the screen and the QR code. There should have been in 10 minutes, an email will arrive in your inbox that also has the link to this survey. Your feedback is valued by us. It helps us to improve our training program and also to get funding so that we can continue to offer free training.